Welcome to the Grey Atom YouTube channel. Here you'll get everything from a webinar, student diary, data science Fridays where your questions are answered. Basically, everything that you need to get yourself upskilled in data sciences. Hit the subscribe button, click on the bell icon, have a look at the videos, and if you find something interesting, don't forget to like it. Follow us socially, and we will be there always serving you the best.
We have Ashish Janda helping us learn linear regression with regularization. And Ashish is a senior data scientist at Enquero Private Limited, where he works with business and product team in delivering data science solutions for various functions. He carries 4+ years of experience and has previously worked with CA Technologies, Decision Minds, ACAD Guild, InSophie, and ADP learning models to solve business problems in both product and service or consulting companies. He has mentored quite a lot of students in machine learning and deep learning before. So, people, please stay tuned for an amazing session that's about to begin. And I would like you guys to probably give questions at the end so that Ashish can finish most of what he's teaching. If he and or probably he'll just set up an agenda wherein however he wants. It could be questions on the go, or it could be questions at the end. Also, I would really like you guys to help us with your feedback. Once I share the forms, we'll be happy to help you with all the material that is being used on the session as well as the recording. So, handing it over to Ashish, please go ahead.
Yeah. Hi all, welcome for today's session. And maybe I just want to know how many people. I guess there's around 15 people join. Yeah, let me just get started for today's session. What are the things that I have to cover? All right, so I kind of see the see a mixed audience here. Few people just getting started with ML, and few of us are already comfortable with it. Few of us are not the newbies to ML. So yeah, I mean, I pretty much got a sense of what the audience is like. So for today's session, I will be covering linear regression with regularization. I will be covering a couple of data sets to start with. Obviously, as we go through, we'll be looking at it in a business perspective more than just the technical aspects, and then slowly get into the technical details of what's the algorithm like, what's the pseudocode of the algorithm, what's the math behind it, make it a little more intuitive in nature, and then ended up with regularization techniques. Yeah, and that's what we'll be getting to at the end of the session. So at the end of the session, you will be fairly comfortable with what linear regression is, and where do we apply for people who are already started and fairly comfortable with it. Probably there's a critical thinking aspect that I've injected in this session as part of this 1.5 hour, or yeah, 1.5 hour session, so that there are some takeaways for the guys who are already into ML, and things that we come across in day-to-day problems when we get into a situation where we are trying to predict continuous variable, or we are just trying to model regression technique, right? So yeah, that's the agenda, is to get clear with the linear regression math, and then get into a business perspective use case, and then uh, another use case which just demonstrates the technical aspects of linear regression in terms of getting the accuracy, or here it is more like a sum of square error, uh, and then getting into the regularization aspect, and then figuring out what the right way of tuning the hyperparameters. So that's the agenda of today. Let me get started with few nuggets of example. Let me just pull up my value paper. All right. Cool. So I would start fairly abstractive. Generally, that is what I prefer to do. So uh, let's take a very simple problem where, let's say, you are trying to uh, understand how is the pay structure works like based on the given years of experience. Okay. So before getting into the linear regression and before getting into the math, let me just take a step back and tell you. for starters, what's the way to think about it? As in, like, uh, where do you think, where are some basic examples or basic use cases where you kind of see this application, right? So experience versus salary. Okay, although it's a very straightforward problem to solve, you can pick any HR person and just say, at this experience, what do you think the salary of a person or a candidate should be? And it's fairly simple thing. But just to get started, let's say we have years of experience on the x-axis, and then we're trying to predict the salary on the y-axis, right? Or yeah, let me just have a scale of let's say 2, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and so on. And on the y-axis, I will be on the scale of 3 in lakhs. All right. So now we are just, let's say, modeling, or we are just trying to understand. We have taken one of us out of this session, and we're just trying to understand how how that person has progressed in his career across his experience and salaries. So let's just draw some random points at 2 year experience, maybe somewhere around 4, 5 something, and 4 at 4 years of experience, something like 7, 6 years of experience, something like 12 something, and then 8, this, this. Okay. So this is, let's say, one of us have just got the data. I mean, like, I've just, let's say, pulled in data from one of us, and based on the years of experience, what's the salary that the person drew, right? And this is just one of us, right? Now, if let's say there's another person who just comes in and says, you know what, I'm just starting my career, and I want to know how would my growth path be? You know, although it's a trivial question to ask, but just for starters, this should be good. So uh, then what do we do? So let's say that person wants to know, at 7 years of experience, where I will be around 28, maybe I'm getting married or something like that. What do you think that how I will be placed in terms of financial aspects, right? So here is 7 years of experience, something, and then uh, based on just one person's experience, we would say something like, you know, you will be anywhere between 12 to 15. Although there are many aspects to it. There's you know, what the person is working on, where the person is working, as in, what's the geography? Is it one of the Delhi, Mumbai, and Bangalore? Is it like Hyderabad, Chennai? Things like that would matter. But let's say we are just assuming those have zero impact, right? We're just thinking that experience is directly depending on the salary. So for the new person who just came in, we would say, okay, fine. At 7 years experience, you would be placed somewhere between 12 to 15. All right. So, but then there's a limited knowledge that we are taking, but that is just one person's data, right? Now, let's say we all of us plot our things here, as in, we all of us plot our salary versus experience here, and this is how it look like. It's look like. Now, then it becomes hard for that, you know, for us to assess that fresher who just want to know where he or she would be after 7 years. Now, it would be something like this. It could be as less as maybe 8, close to 9 lakhs. And it could be as high as maybe 15 lakhs. Okay. At the same 7 years of experience, you get a spread, which is which is something that you should be approximating, right? So this is where you know, it gets I mean, these are the starter problems that you could probably. My voice is not clear. Am I audible now? Okay, cool. So yeah, so for starters, right, this is good to go. Now, at 7 years experience, 7 years of experience, we see as less as 9 lakhs, as high as 15 lakhs. So there's always a spread attached to every value that we are seeing, isn't it? something is flickering voice coming. Okay, I'm not sure what's that. Just let me just unmute. Let me just mute and let me know if you still hear that. If that's there, it's not from me. All right. Yeah, I unfortunately can't do much about it because I'm not really able to understand what's the reason behind that flickering. Maybe I'll just.
Maybe it's your Bluetooth, Ashish. Can you just check if use without using it?
The problem is that Bluetooth is the only
Way to
stereo
get a
source.
clear voice. Yeah, I can understand. Maybe if you can try, if that's not possible, then I think
If you are okay, me rejoining again uh, with the same Bluetooth, but I have a charger plugged in, so I'll.
okay. Yeah, you can try doing that. No problem.
All right.
Guys, we'll wait for like a minute or two. Okay. Thank you.
Can you guys can you guys hear me? Am I audible or is it still there?
It's good. It's good right now.
It's good.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I was just getting this example for linear regression, as in what data it would be a good thing to go with. So all we started off with experience on the x-axis and salary that a person he or she should expect uh, at a given experience, right? First thing what we did was we just plotted off for different. We just plotted off for one person that across the years of experience, what was the salary trend for one person, and then we figured out it's it is too uh, it is a situation of overfitting where we are just basically taking one person's data to predict further, right? So then we went back and said, okay, fine, let's plot uh, salaries across different experience for all the people, let's say, who are there in this session, right? So the problem here would be that, you know, at 7 years of experience, you see as less as 9 lakhs of salary, and at the same 7 years of experience, you see 15 lakhs. All right. So that's one challenge that we may have to address now. At every years of experience, you see a minima and a maxima as well, right? Then how do we approximate this thing? All right. So to do that, let's assume for now that we have a nice line like this, which I'll talk about it how to get to this. But then let's assume this is a line, and this line is generally called as a line of best fit. All right. So the line of best fit is something that could be a reference for you. Now, at 7 years of experience, all you have to do is project your experience on this, and you will get what would be your salary. Of course, with few errors, but at least you have a source of reference, isn't it? So the line of best fit is a right way or a better way to approximate it than just looking at this visualization, which has quite a good spread. I mean, this is still okay, but if you get into the real time scenarios, you would see uh, the spread could be little more what do you say, little more broad, and also it could also lead to a few more bigger assumptions, right? So a line of best fit would be a good line of reference to project at any given experience what would be a salary. So this is just for starters. Now we now understand that this line could be taken as reference, and at any point of time, if you go back to the linear algebra classes or the calculus classes, we know that from that y equal to mx plus c. Okay, not sure something your voice is not audible. Hello, am I audible? I see the voice thing fluctuating here. Vasha, Am I audible? Because I
Yeah,
think.
yes, you are totally audible. It's highly possible that their own system or their headphones is not working. So
Oh,
just guys, please make sure that your devices and your computers are also uh, matching the required settings. Thank you.
okay, cool. Thanks for that. All right. So now we have a line equation that we've seen back in calculus days, y equal to mx plus c. Now you don't really have to visualize this. This is the visual representation of your linear regression. Now, and then the logical representation would be this, that y equal to mx plus c, kind of an equation where m is what you get the slope, right? So y equal to m is what your slope is of the line, x plus c. X could be your years of experience, c is just simply an intercept. For people who don't remember this, probably I'll just give you a refresher. So this thing here is the intercept. That is, when your years of experience is zero, that means could be your fresher. What would be your salary? I mean, that's kind of a normalizer to that. And then you have slope. Slope is how inclined your growth was. Now, let me just grab a very small example here, because we have already introduced to this concept of years of experience and the salary. I'll just not spend too much time there. And on the y-axis, instead of 3 lakhs, I take 4 lakhs as my scale, and assume that I'm modeling now not the IT employee salary based on experience, but maybe someone who is into a government body. Okay, so uh, assuming that, with the conventions that, assuming that the growth aspect is not as much, but the security aspect is more. But at this point, we are just looking at the growth aspect, so there's no security aspect involved here. So at this, for understanding this precondition, maybe we will have points like this. Okay, so all we have done is picked a few government employees and by years of experience, just plotted their salaries. So now you can see, if you relatively compare, I'm not sure if I was successful to draw a less slope line, less steeper line, but the intuition here to is to get to a point where at 8 years of 8 years of experience, you see close to 9 lakhs or 10 lakhs of salary. But at the same point, if you see in IT setup, you end up earning somewhere between 12 to 15, or maybe close to 15, right? So this is less steep, less slope, magnitude of slope will be less, and this is a little more inclined. So now you get the feeling that, or the intuition that M basically is modeling that aspect of how steep or less steep your thing is, or your salary is when compared to your experience. Now, the absolute zero steep is this, like no matter what experience you are, your salary is pretty much fixed with a very less steep slope. All right. So m equal to 0 suggests that your salary is pretty much constant. M is very high, suggests that your growth aspect is very huge. M is close to 1. That means you're based on the intercept. Of course, you're perfectly linearly placed with your y variable, and it is more proportional in nature. That means for every year increase, you get what do you say, more constant increase compared to uh, the one you see in your IT setup. All right. So this is just to get you a little more intuitive about this session. Steady growth. Yes, that's right, Chandra. So that is all about just getting to know data in the perspective of statistics and calculus. Now let me just go back and ask you a few things here. Maybe you can reply it in a Zoom chat or whatever. So government job. So I think we have already answered this thing. Like for a government body, your slope is steady, right? Or a little less inclined when compared to an IT job. By using linear regression, there are other things that could be constants. Now, let us just look at those, right? The third case that I talked about, that is like a DC voltage, that is this, pretty much has no dependency on your x variable, right? Because if you see this, and you're pretty much saying that slope is 0, that means y equal to c. So c is nothing but some intercept value which you can anyways predict upfront in time, not really required to have experience as your independent variable, isn't it? So now, but let me just ask you a few couple of questions, right? So can we predict the runs in today's India's West Indies match? Do you think that we would require a linear regression to do that? So I get an answer. Hopefully, I'm unable to get the chat displayed on my screen. Yeah. So no says Varun. So which is rightly, I mean that's the right answer. So if you think about it, right? If you think about it, the world, even the recent World Cup score, right? It was around what? If I remember it right, the semi-final score was around 240 something, right? Now, if you go back in time, also with number of years that people have spent in the world cricket, the scores have not really changed hugely, right? If you think about it, it's pretty much around 250 to 300, 240 to 300. Although there's been a lot of technology coming in, although there's the skill of the cricketer has improved largely with leaps and bounds, but you still see that pretty much the good total for a given ground is pretty much stationary, isn't it? If you go to maybe a good pitch, you will say that 325 and above is something that you expect. If you go to a seaming pitch, you say that around 200 to 250 is something which is a good score, right? We really don't see the trend catching up as such. All right, so we don't see a data something like this, like with some skill, your number of runs are increasing and things like that. So maybe it is, but the counter effects are factoring them out. Okay, so the answer to the first question was very rightly said by Varun, I guess. And then, can we predict real estate prices in Hyderabad? By the way, I'm based out of Hyderabad, so that's why I picked it. But can we predict real estate prices? When I say real estate, maybe you can think about land prices in Hyderabad. Do you think it's a good thing to do that, or do you think linear regression could be a reasonably better approach to do that? Yes, the answers are flowing. So we get a yes all throughout. Yeah, that's right, isn't it? So as the time you see, like basically you see a lot of factors contributing to it, but most importantly, you see that the prices are not stuck at a range. They are actually moving away and moving in a positive direction, and therefore you would get a regression line if you manage to factor out all the, or if you manage to get all the independent variables in, you would be able to see a regression line with a positive slope, isn't it? So yeah, that was just for a quick refresher. Now let me just get into some business problem statement. All right. So yeah, so I'll talk about how do we create that linear regression line. I think I'm half an hour already past the session, so I'll just talk about this. This is someone who this will be useful for someone who is already into this. They understand linear regression, but there are some critical thinking aspects that probably would help, right? So the next thing that we'll be doing is just getting into the data, looking at the data and understanding whether we go about applying this and use linear regression out of it, and then we'll slowly get into the math of it. Okay, the gradient descent and stuff. So yeah, So the data that you're seeing right now on my screen is basically the advertising data, the amount of money spent on advertising. Now you can think about it as thousands or lakhs or whatever unit that you want to, but definitely it's not just 230 INR, but it should be somewhere around 230,000 or whatever you can imagine about. The important aspect that I'm trying to convey through this is just the data and the business aspect of things. All right. So there is this TV, radio, newspaper spend, and this is, by the way, a popular example to demonstrate a linear regression, but I've just tweaked it a little bit to make it a little more interesting. Okay. So TV, radio, newspaper, the amount spent on them, and how is it reflecting on sales? So think about that. You're part of a big MNC giant or something, which is a product, and you're trying to understand where do you invest so that you can increase your sales. Is it the TV channel? Is it the radio channel? Or is it the newspaper? Which are the better ways of marketing to drive your sales forward? All right. So, and then you have a couple of countries. Okay. Let me just see how many do we have. Yes. All right. Oh, shucks. I think. Okay. I had that. I had this data, but let me just quickly get this right. Yeah. Cool. So all I've done is basically I had prepared or curated some data sets so that we can get it be a little more interesting. However, I've managed to do that again, or reproduce that again rather. So basically, there's this data set which deals about the TV, radio, newspaper spends and what's the sales that they get. And there are two countries here. There's one country I think has around 200 data points. The other has a similar number of data points, but then the sales numbers and all of that do vary, right? So the reason why I wanted to get to this scenario is this. Let me just filter on the country. And let's just go about visualizing just the basic aspects of this. Again, let's call this as country 1. And let's filter out for country 2. All right. So we have just segregated both the countries, but let's say if you were not doing that, and let's say assume that we want to just know the interaction of or the dependency of how these sales do trigger with amount spent on TV. Okay. So if you look at it, right, I mean, this looks like, okay, fine. I mean, there's some linear trend. What do you guys think? How do you think it's showing some linearity? Do you think that linear regression is a good thing to do? Any comments on this? On the x-axis, by the way, is the sales. Sorry, is the amount spent on TV marketing, and on the y-axis is basically the sales, isn't it? So this looks like a little bit fair enough, but can we do better? Is the question. So if I just go back and do it by country, because one thing to understand here is uh, country one. Oops, sorry, I took the country three. One thing to understand here is by country, the nature of people who are basically purchasing could change, right? So maybe country would like the people in one country would be uh, binge watchers or so on and so forth, or someone who is hooked up to the TV. Maybe on the other country, in some other countries, the drivers for the sales could be different, isn't it? And when I try to do that country wise, so if you see just segregate for country one, you see a fair enough linear trend coming out. When I see the TV amount spent on TV advertisements and the sales driven. On the other hand, the country two suggests that pretty much there's no dependency, all right, of amount spent on TV advertising to the sales driven. Okay, so and that's where and this could be the same case. This could be. I'm not just saying a hard and fast statement here, but this could be a possible case for radio, newspaper, and so on. So once generally this is for the people who are beginning into ML, and once they are done with the course, basically they do commit this kind of mistakes because they see, okay, there's a regression variable out there, or the continuous variable which on which I can regress out there, and there are these input variables. Now I just can go ahead and regress on that and maybe look at it in the overall regression perspective, and they would maybe comfortable enough with this kind of trend coming out of the data. But if you slice and dice further, and this is basically talking about the experience, the problems that we often see in the industry, that by country, by region, by EMEA region, by APAC region, the behavior of customers do change. And for accommodating that, possibly you should go back and accommodate the same thing in your methodologies for model building, isn't it? So that's the overall picture of this. So by country, if we see, the country one seems to be a little more linear than country two, and country two absolutely has no relation to your x-axis. It's like just one DC voltage. If I basically go ahead and build a linear regression on top of it, I would just get an intercept out of it. Okay, and that's not the right thing to do. Probably a mean or median would be the right thing to do. Okay, so yes, so that's the second part of this thing of this setup. So basically, this is the first data set that we'll be working on. Let me just go back and now talk about a little bit of theory. Now that we understand, the part one was about understanding where do you go ahead and apply this. How would linear regression solve your problems, right? So we just saw salary or the experience, how it is impacting our salary, and how you can model it if it is impacting. The second one was more on the data side, that you just don't get any data, and I mean, you just don't go ahead and apply your linear regression on any data that you see. You just have to use few business aspects around your data and basically inject your business strategies into your methodology, isn't it? So that's the second part. Now it will be more math side of things. As in, like, we've seen the beauty of linear regression. We've seen that, you know, we can approximate things very quite what do you say, quite easily, right? So how does it actually work, right? I mean, how do we get to this line of best fit? Hello here. How do we get to this line of best fit? Now, for this question, there's a follow-up question that says, what is a good line of best fit? Like, we say, yes, there's a line of best fit, but what is it? What is so good about it? Okay, now coming back to the same example, right? The salary and experience, experience and salary. And talking about the same data, and then there's a linear regression line of best fit passing. So this line would be good when probably whatever I drew here is fairly good. Like, let's say this thing, these are the points, and in the interest of space, I'm just stopping here. Let's say here are the points, and if I draw a regression line here, is that a right thing to do? Or this one is the right thing? Let me give you the numbers of this model so that you can vote for those. Is this a good one? So 1, 2, and 3. Which one is better? Which line do you think is approximating better for a given experience, the salary? Probably you can just ping it in the chat box. So, like, if you think about it, right? So this line is basically falling inside the spread, and it's kind of approximating it fairly better. But if you think about this line, right? So what that means is, if there are cases where at maybe like 5 years experience, you're saying 20 lakhs per annum something, whereas the spread has at most around let's say 15 lakhs, and the minimum is what, 9 lakhs. Okay, where the spread says this, you're saying something else, because your line is just lying outside your maximas, or maxima is the wrong term to use, but the maximum point at your in your training data, where you see a salary for this 5 years experience, the maximum salary that you could show is like 15 lakhs, right? So that is what you're missing here. And the problem could be when maybe you approximate for a guy who be drawing actually 10 lakhs, but you approximate it to 20 lakhs, and you get to an error of 10 lakhs. Just because this point, this line of best fit is not really a line of best fit. It's approximating, it's over approximating things. Okay. Or I would say it is overestimating things, not over approximating. The other thing, the other line is just below the line, the minimum values for pretty much all the things, pretty much all the points. So this is underestimating the points, right? At 5 years experience, we may end up predicting around 6 or 7 lakhs per annum, right? So both of these are unobvious guesses to say, you know, these are not goods. These are goods. Now, but the reason why I popped in second and third, obviously these are very easy option to take, saying that this is not a good regression line, is to get to the point where we say that, you know, understand what are the nuts and bolts that goes in to say this is a good line. Okay, what is that reasoning that comes out which says you intuitively that this is a good line? This is and that, which is why I have plotted very obvious regression lines to say no, right? So if you just take a deep dive into this, you'll understand that basically at any given point, this regression line is trying to give you more or less same errors. Okay, from the upper bound, from the lower bound for a given experience, pretty much the errors are distributed same in the same magnitude, not in the direction, of course, right? So the error, what are errors? So let me introduce you to the errors first. I won't go ahead and draw it for full, but let me just say, for this point, for this experience, let's say from 4 years experience, there's a data point which says at 4 years experience you get to have around 6 lakhs per annum. The line approximates to some 8 lakhs maybe. Okay, so this thing that you see is the error. Okay, and this error would happen both above and below the line of best fit. Okay, so at times we underestimate things, at times we overestimate things. Overall, we just treat everything which is either underestimated or overestimated as error. And most importantly, these errors are not considered with direction. We are just considering them with the magnitude. So we are looking at the line of best fit. The best fit refers here to less errors. Okay, and the errors, by errors we mean that we don't need overestimation errors to be called as less error compared to underestimating errors. Both errors are one and the same for us. So for which we say, let's say error is just the predicted value minus the actual value, and let's say we just take the absolute values out of it. What would be better would be, I just say predicted minus actual whole square. Okay, in this way, what I'm trying to see is for every small error, let's say I get an error of 2 lakhs, I'm just exploding that 2 lakhs to 2 lakhs whole square, something like that, isn't it? So what happens with this is the error quotient increases, right? And also the direction just gets nullified. So there's no direction once you square it. So in a nutshell, what we are looking at is, if I call y as the actual value and y hat as the predicted value, and the predicted value here refers to anything on this line, right? So for 8 years experience, maybe you say 15 lakhs. So this is my y hat. But whereas the y actual could be something like 18 lakhs. Okay, so in which case y minus y hat would be 3 lakhs, and then I'm squaring it. So that's how I'm looking at the square errors now. Now these errors we need to take for all the points. So now what would be the cost involved? So the cost involved would be sigma equal to 1 to n, where n is the number of points that you have, right? And for all of those points, I'm looking at what is the actual y, what is the predicted y, and I'm just squaring them off. Okay, this is called sum of squared errors. Squared errors, or it is generally referred as SSE, sum of squared errors. Okay, and if you were to model for, so the cost is up to you. So only thing is the cost is always relative in nature. That means if I look at sum of squared errors as my metric to say this line is best fit or not, I should only stick to sum of squared errors in all throughout my experiments. That means I draw this line and I capture sum of squared errors. Let's call this as line 1, and just few points around, and then I draw another line like called line 2, and then evaluate the same sum of squared errors. You shouldn't do something like evaluate sum of squared errors for this and then evaluate mean absolute error for this. No, whatever metric you pick, you should pick it and then you should evaluate it on relativity. Okay, so regression line 1, what is the sum of squared error? What is the regression line 2 sum of squared error? What's the regression line 3 sum of squared error, and so on. And whichever line gives you the least sum of squared errors is the line of best fit. Okay, and now we know intuitively what error means. Error means the actual minus predicted. How far is your line of reference far from your actual points? So it perfectly makes sense, isn't it? So that's the cost metric. Now I propose you another term called cost metric, and which is sum of squared errors, which is y minus y hat whole square, sigma I is equals to 1 to n. All right, and let's see all this I here. Now another thing that to understand here is we already spoke about this, y equal to mx plus c, isn't it? where m is the slope, x is your independent variable, which is your experience, and c is the intercept. Okay, so I got mx plus c is what the thing is. Now you just substitute those into this. Mx plus c whole square. Okay, so what we want to do is minimize this for our training data. Okay, isn't it? So sigma is equals to 1 to n yi minus mx plus c whole square, and I'm trying to minimize this. Okay, this is my cost function that I want to minimize. Now, what do we do to minimize this? Yi, do we have any control on yi? No. Why? Because yi is basically the actual values. In our previous example, when we were talking about experience and salary, yi is the salary. So you have absolutely no control. Whatever is there in the data, you just take it with its face, right? So yi is, there's no control that we have. But I think if you see this, right, mx plus c, x is again, there's absolutely no control that you have on that. That's years of experience. You should basically take it as is, but probably these two, m and c, that is the slope and the intercept, uh, there is some control that you can have over this, because this is what your variables are here. So all we need to do is now get to the right m and c, which can lead us to a least sum of squared errors, or in a way less cost. Okay, so that is what we are trying to get to. Now let's take it a little further. Now y equal to mx plus c. For the terminology perspective, I'm just trying to represent this as this one, c1x plus c2. Okay, so where c1 and c2 are something that you want to get to for the line of best fit. Now the problem has boiled down to getting to right c1 and c2. Now how do we get there is the question. Okay, so now if you think about it, cost is a function of error, and c1 and c2 are part of that error. So cost is basically function of c1 and c2, isn't it? Now there is a clue. Here is the clue which leads us to a betterment of our approach, which is we now know that we are trying to minimize cost, and we already know that cost is basically a little is a function of c1 and c2, isn't it? From the previous notation, yi minus mx plus c whole square. This is what the cost is. So now what we are trying to do is, now we have a function that we are trying to minimize for. Okay, how do we do that? So let's assume for intuition, I'm just trying to draw c1 and cost. Okay, and let's assume that this is what the function, like for different values of c1, your cost is varying like this. Okay, assume that we have figured out c1, and we know what is x, we know what is y, we know what is y hat, everything we know. Now we know the cost. We substitute all the values and we get a function, a notation like this, or a representation like this. For different c1 value, the cost seems to be this. So you want to get to a cost which you want to get to a c1 which minimizes the cost, which is this, isn't it? So this is c1 and this is the cost. So this is the cost pertaining to the minimum c1, or this is the c1 pertaining to the minimum cost, isn't it? So now what we are trying to understand is, can we get to that point? Is there a way to get to that point? Yes, there is. For that, we need a little bit of calculus refresher. And before that, let me just talk about few things. Please keep in mind one thing, that the reason why we are going into calculus right now is to solve our problem. The problem is to figure out how to arrive at that C1 and C2 values, which minimizes this cost. Why do we want to minimize the cost? The reason why I want to minimize the cost is to get to the less sum of squared errors. Why do we want to reduce the sum of squared errors? It is to get to the line of best fit. The line of best fit is the line of best fit which can help us to predict y as a function of x. isn't it? So the bigger objective is, of course, to figure out the right y equal to mx plus c, m and c. But for that, we have just gone into sum of squared error, which is our cost. From there, we understood the cost is a function of C1 and C2. Now cost is a function of C1 and C2. Now that we know how, now we want to devise a method which can help us to figure out the C1, C2 pertaining to the least cost. Before that, let me ask you a few questions. Okay, let's assume this is a function representation. Okay, there's some variable a, and then there is f of a, or you can call it as y. Now, what's the point of minimum? The global minima is this. That means if I look at this overall function, I see here is the minimum point, and I see here is the maximum point. Let's assume I truncate that scope. Or else let me just use the same representation, isn't it? So let's say I use this one. That means I am looking at the same function, but I'm just truncating the scope for us to understand what's the maxima and minima out of this. So let me truncate in a way that I see a maxima as well as a minimum. So here is the maxima and here is the minimum in this truncated scope. Okay, so understanding the minima, understanding the concept of a maxima will help us to figure out the cost function, or help us figure out the C1 and C2, which will give you the least cost. Okay, so now we are trying to understand the maxima minima. How do we intuitively understand where the maxima and minima of a function resides? Okay, and for the simplicity scope, we want to target for local minima. This is called local minima. Okay, and this is called global minima. Across this function, this is the minima, but across a scope, this is minima. Okay, so now for that, little bit of math here, very intuitive. Okay, so to understand where a maxima and minima lies, we need to just go back and see what's the basic understanding of maxima minima. If you think about this line, there's an x1, there's an x2, there's a y1, and there's a y2 pertaining to this. Okay, and if I want to know the slope, it's easy, y2 minus y1 by x2 minus x1. Okay, so this is what the slope is. We know that from our formula. So that is basically for a change of x, what is the change in y? Okay, now if I give you a line like this, x1, x2, m1, m2. If you see, this is pretty steep line. Okay, for a small change in x, you see a bigger change in y. Okay, so what that means is you need to basically if you evaluate the slope, you'll get a higher slope. Okay, another thing is the slope where what is the situation of a line where the slope is basically zero? Something like this, where for x1 and x2 change, x1 change to x2, there's no change in y, isn't it? Pretty much no change. So now to arrive at the minima, we use this kind of technique basically, where we say that at any point, let's say I pick any point and I just increment that point by delta, a small delta, and I figure out what's the slope of that delta. So if you know, this is, I mean, if you can, like, as you can see here, here's maxima, here's minima, here's maxima, here's minima. So at this maxima, if I take this point as you know, x1, and then we say x1 plus delta, and I say use pertaining points, pertaining y points on, then y1 and y2 is pretty much equal to y1, almost equal to y2, because from changing from x1 to x1 delta, this delta, x1 to x1 delta, you don't see any change in y. And therefore, if you come back and substitute it here, when y2 equal to y1, y1 minus y2 equal to 0, and therefore the slope goes 0. So Here's one hint to understand where the maxima and minima can be found. That is, wherever you take any point, randomly take any point and just increment a little bit of delta and see what the slope is. If the slope is 0, that means you are in either maxima or a minima. Okay, for just a little bit increment of x values, you see what's the y value and then figure out what's the slope. If the slope is 0, you are either at maxima or at the minimum. Okay, having said that, let's just go ahead with our cost versus C1 definition that we had. Let's assume this is what we are looking at. Okay, and what we do is, because let's assume this is an optimization problem. For developers, you can think about a problem where y minus mx, sorry, c1x plus c2 whole square for all the points you're trying to know, and you're just trying to get to a C1 and C2. You're looping through multiple values of C1 and C2 so that this pretty much becomes 0. Okay, so that is what we are trying to do in a very naive method. Like you're just going through exhaustive grid search or a for loop when you are trying to plug in multiple C1 and C2 values, and then you're getting to know, okay, for this C1 and C2 value, this is my prediction, and then prediction minus actual, is it close to 0 for all the points? That is what we are trying to know. But more structured way of solving this problem is achieved using gradient descent. Okay, for this, I'd like to introduce you to another term called Newton-Raphson method. Folks of BTech must have heard this back in your M1 or M2 in your BTech days. Okay, so Newton-Raphson method is basically trying this for C1. If I use it, C1 equal to C1 in I iteration is equal to C1 in I minus 1 iteration minus alpha into dou by dou C1 of cost. Okay, now this is the equation which will get us to the right C1, and this also is scalable to C2, by the way. I mean, I don't have to write that again, but you can assume that C2 also you can get to by just substituting the C1 as C2, and you can just iterate through this and get to the point. But now, how to use this is what I'm trying to say you right now. Okay, so we understood from the previous discussion that slope, whenever it is 0, it is either maximum or minimum. Okay, now another thing that you would want to understand is how do we translate the slope to differentiation. If you remember from your intermediate days, calculus and intermediate days, when you have y equal to function of x, you did dy by dx, and this, by the way, was to understand for a change in x, how is the y changing. Dy by dx, difference in y by difference in x. So this is, if you see, is analogous to y2 minus y by x2 minus x1 for given points, for given 2 points. This we were trying to iterate across the function, but this, if you have a couple of points, then you can easily figure out the dy by dx equivalent would be the slope. Okay, now with this basics of maximum, minimum, and slope, let's try to see how to use Newton-Raphson method. Sorry, dou by dou cost, dou by dou C1 of cost. So from the previous discussion, that how the dy by dx can be interpreted, if you can translate the discussion into this, dou by dou C1 of cost, it's basically change in cost divided by change in C1 values. Okay, now we were visualizing C1 as opposed to cost. Okay, and we assumed a curve like this. So basically what it means is through this we'll get to the ideal C1 which can minimize the cost, that is this value. How do we do that? Let's just go ahead and do that. So this, by the way, dou by dou C1 of cost is basically for any C1 that I pick and a small delta that I take out of it, there is a change in cost function, right? So this plus delta. So this is the change in your cost function magnitude, right? So this is what we are trying to measure. So basically, instead of dou by dou C1 of cost, you can just figure out the slope here and understand how to evaluate this. You really don't have to go back and do all this differentiation. Okay. So long story short, what we are trying to say here is dou by dou C1 of cost is analogous to calculating the slope of 2 points when you see cost versus C1. Okay, which is what it is. Now let's start at a point like this. I started with the point C1 and I just incremented it at C1 plus delta. Okay, when I say I started at a point, I randomly took any C1 value and substituted back into my cost function. What is my cost function? It is this yi, which is my actual, minus mx plus c whole square. Okay, or m here is C1 and c here is C2. Okay, so I just substituted, I just started with some random C1 value. At this point, just ignore intercept out of this picture. Now we are just looking at C1. We just gave some C1 and calculated this prediction and in a way calculated the cost, and based on that C1 there was some cost incurred, which is this. Now I increment that C1 with some delta and say that here is the new cost for that. So let's call this as cost 1 and cost 2. Okay, now let's see how to evaluate this point, this thing, right? So C1 plus delta, CT1 plus delta. So Y2 is, so this is Y1, this is Y2, this is X1 and this is X2. So is X2 greater than X1? Yes, because it's a delta ahead of X1. Is Y2 greater than Y1? Yes, because again, for there's an increment in cost by delta. So Y2 is greater than Y1 and X2 is greater than X1. So the slope that we are trying to get is Y2 minus Y1 by X2 minus X1. Now this would be a finite positive value. The magnitude, of course, we are not defining at this point of time. So let me just go back to the Newton-Raphson method now. C1 I is equals to C1 I minus 1 minus alpha into dou by dou C1 of cost. So we just evaluated this thing, that is the slope. We figured out there's a positive value for a unit change. When I go from here to here, I just increment C1 to C1 plus delta, I get a positive slope. So there is this positive value. For now, think about alpha is basically a smoothing factor, or it's a learning rate basically. Its value ranges between 0 to 1, possibly more between 0 to 0.5. Okay, so we are multiplying a finite positive value with some ratio or fraction, so we will still be ending up with a positive value. So C1 I minus 1 is basically the value with which we started. Let's give some value to it. That is, let's say that C1 was talking about experience, C1 was 8 and C1 plus delta was, let's say, 8.5 something. Okay, we were evaluating at 8 years experience and 8.5 years experience. What was no, that's basically, sorry, I think that's strong terminology. So C1 we gave as 8 or 2, let's say, randomly started with 2, and C1 plus delta was 2.25, let's say. So it's just the coefficient value, right? So 2 and 2.25 for those for 2. So in our example, C1 is equals to 2. So wherever we started at a point 2 is what your C1 I minus 1 is. It is an iterative algorithm. So in the next iteration, the value of C1 would be defined as C1 in the first iteration is equal to C1 in the 0th iteration minus this thing, which is a positive number. So C10 is basically a 2 minus some positive number, which would be a value which is little less than the previous value, which will be now C1 will be going to a lesser value. Okay, like this, it just goes on, reduces to a point where we start here and it makes sure that it reaches somewhere here. Okay, at this point, when we take C1 and C1 plus delta, basically for this change, there's no Y change, and therefore your slope becomes 0. This is a point of minimum, right? And what happens to our equation? Ci equal to Ci minus 1 minus alpha into dou by dou C1 into cost. So when the slope goes 0, so we reduce C1 equal to 2 from C1 something which is less than 2, right? So it came here. Similarly, if you take another stride, it comes here, comes here, comes here, until a point you come to a zero slope area, and where you realize with increase in C1, you don't see an increase in Y, you don't see any change in Y, and therefore this goes 0. When this term goes 0, C1 is equals to, or Ci is equal to, or C1I rather equal to C1I minus 1. Okay, so the previous iteration, whatever the C1 was, the coefficient was, will be equal to the current coefficient, and therefore you don't see any change. And wherever you see your coefficient values are not changing, that is the point of minima, and that is the point where your coefficients, ideal coefficients, will be for your line of best fit. Okay, so basically this is what it is. Y equal to C1x plus C2x. You iterate through gradient descent, get the ideal C1 and C2, and once you get the ideal C1 and C2, these are the C1 and C2 which will reduce your sum of squared errors, and therefore reducing the cost, and therefore creating a better regression line. Okay, so that is what the math behind the linear regression is. Basically, it's a mix of gradient, it's gradient descent constituting of Newton-Raphson method, a little bit of knowledge on slope, and maxima minima. Okay, so I can take further questions. Let me just go back and get to a demo. Okay, so we are taking the same data set, the advertising data set. There are a couple of things now that we know, or else let me just go to the demo part so that there's right balance to this session. All right, so we have already seen this data set, which is trying to predict the sales based on the TV, radio, newspaper purchase. All right, and then I'm just trying to figure out the visualizations for these guys. So this is the first one is TV versus sales. You see there is some good distribution. There's some linear trend out of it, and then newspaper, not newspaper. I think it's the radio. Radio is fairly okay, and then newspaper, you absolutely see nothing out of this. I mean, it's pretty much spread across like a random distribution. Okay, so now our picks after doing the visualization is, our picks for this model would be mostly TV and radio. But let's see what linear regression has to say. Let me just go back and see if I have the all things ready here. Yeah, this is the one. Yeah, so we are using a linear sklearn library, linear regression library from sklearn.linear model, import linear regression, and then all you need to do is call first get the instance of that method and of that class and call the method out of that. lm1.fit is basically calling x and y values, which is our TV, radio, newspaper. And let me basically use stats model. It's another API which is reasonably better to work with. All right, so here I just ran a regression on TV versus sales. Okay, and meanwhile, what I'm trying to do is sum of squared errors. This particular statement is basically doing the sum of squared errors, and p dot sum and p dot square lm dot residuals. Residuals are basically capturing the errors, and those errors I'm squaring and summing it off. So it's sum of squared errors that you see here. So with TV 200102 is what the sum of squared errors is. At this point, you don't know how good or bad it is, and then I'll just walk you through all the things that you need to see. R squared is basically a statistic which says how well your input variable, or here TV, is explaining your y variable. The variation that in y is explained, 61% of the variation of y is explained by TV. Okay, so the explanatory power kind of a metric is R squared and adjusted R squared. I will talk about R squared as I go through this session. I have the formula for this down the notebook. And then adjusted R squared is 61, so 61 percentage. Some intuition here is adjusted R squared, no matter how many variables you add, if the variables are not adding the value to your model, it will penalize. That means it will reduce R squared because the variables are not having enough predictive power. So adjusted R square is a metric that you need to look at. Ideally, it is 100 percentage, but mostly in the working scenario, if you get to see anything between 70 to 80, that's great. Uh, and then the next thing that you see is the F statistic p value. Now, what is this? This is the probability with which we are saying this model is not good. The probability that model is not good and not good relatively compared to the mean model. That means if I just take the sales value and mean them and say that this is what the prediction could be, that means if I say on an average, 30,000 sales is what you can happen. What can be, what will happen? That in which case I'm just averaging the previous history sales and saying take this and this is my prediction, as opposed to drawing a sophisticated linear regression equation and drawing a linear regression through gradient descent and whatever. These are the two methods contending for this p-value. If you get a higher p-value, that means the mean model, that means your average is good enough to basically deal with this data. You don't need linear regression. And if you get a very less probability, then that means your linear regression model is adding value here when compared to the mean model. Okay, so p-value is generally preferred to be less than 0.05 for this model to be considered. And then you look at the p-values of these variables, the variables that you have given, the TV coefficient. If you see 0.0475, if you think about it, is fairly decent coefficient, because if you looked at the TV, the magnitude of the variable was around in thousands. The order was in some thousands, so 0.0475 is not a bad coefficient to have, and the p-value is also less. So here, what p-value says is the probability that this variable is not important in a very intuitive way. So lower the better, and the threshold you can keep it at 0.05. Same thing goes with the intercept. So intercept is basically whenever you don't invest anything in your TV, this is the amount of sales that you can get. It's basically the null case, right? And then there's AIC, BIC. So AIC is a loss of information, archaic information criteria. Lower the better, because it is the loss of information metric. So these are the things that you need to look at. First, to start with adjusted R squared, look at the p-value of the overall model, and then look at the p-value of the individual variables. Look at the coefficients. Are they having enough significance? If this would have been 0.00000 something, then probably there's no effect of that coefficient. So also look at the magnitude as opposed to the scale of your input variable. Standard errors, and then lower the better, right? So this is how you basically examine your model. Now let's go ahead and see this model building across three different variables that we had in our data set. Okay, so radio alone, previously we were getting a sum of squared error of 2000 something. Now we have around 3000. So clearly TV is a better variable than radio. At this point, I'm just running a simple linear regression, that is one variable at a time. Just trying to understand the predictive power of each of these guys. Adjusted R squared is 32 as opposed to 61 before. P-value is significant. P-value here also is significant. AIC is higher than before. Yes, higher than before, and yeah. And then let's do it for newspaper. If you see, it has the least explanatory power. And then the p-value is also coming to 0.01, not matching the threshold, but still it is having less R squared. Now let's look at all together. If you see, now our sum of squared error has reduced from 2000 when we had TV as the independent variable, as opposed to what we are seeing right now, it is 556. So sum of squared errors has reduced. That means you have got better coefficients when you have applied these three things together. But we will see individually how each of these is performing. So now we are at 89.6, pretty much 90% explanatory power. And then the coefficients are good enough, but if you see newspaper is negatively impacting, that means if you invest in newspaper, you reduce your sales, not increase. Okay, so and another problem is the p-value. That means it says 86% chance that this variable is not important. So it's quite a high p-value for considering newspaper. So we basically better off dropping it. So we drop this. And now let's look at the p-values. All the p-values are inside 0.05. The coefficients are fair enough. How to interpret this, guys? For every thousand rupees increase, you probably get around 45 units increase in sales, keeping all of them constant. Okay, and then 90% R squared. P-value is very less. AIC is lesser than what you saw in TV, which is around 1000. So this we have achieved a better model. Now this was just to give you a little bit of demo experience, but now let me just go ahead and give you certain assumptions of linear regression. I think I'm kind of running late on time, so Vasha, if you are on the call, can I maybe extend by 10 minutes, because we have lost like 10 minutes while we start.
Sure, no problem. There was a bit of setting and which was required. So you can use another 15 minutes, no problem.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
All right, so far we have just built a linear regression model using stats models. So I would say there's a significant difference between using sklearn and stats model if you are a newbie to Python, because the stats model shows you pretty much all the diagnostic information coming out of your model. So if you're a newbie, it is a good idea to note down the things that you have to evaluate the model on. First, the priority starts from adjusted R squared, p-values of F statistic, and then the p-value for individual variables is the next thing to check. Always remember the p-value 0.05, and it again depends on the criticality of your business. If you are too much critical about getting all this right with a very less error, probably you should try for 0.01 and whatever demands is demanded by your business, right? So, but relatively, it's set always at 0.05, mostly in my experience. And then TV coefficient, and then there's radio coefficient, and then intercept. So the other important thing to remember is you should have the skill and ability to transform this coefficients into the business. Okay, like I said, looking at this, 1,000 bugs increase in TV. What do you say? Marketing increases your sales by close to 45 units, something like that, right? So those things are really important. And coming back to the list, p-value of coefficient themselves with a higher, relatively better magnitude, and then the AICs, then the standard errors. So these are the things that you should look for in the diagnostic plots. Now let me just go back and look at, it's not just that you just go ahead and do the linear regression once you get the data, right? So I've told you a scenario which was more into business perspective, where you decline using a linear regression. That was for country 2. We saw pretty much stationary data, and we applied this linear regression model to predict sales only for the country you want, because we saw some trend out there. That is one way to get to it. The other is the assumptions of linear regression should be met. It's pretty standard thing, assumptions of linear regression. So what are the assumptions of linear regression? So assumptions of linear regressions are this way. So if I plot for different x values, the errors or residuals, and I think I'll talk about the intuition behind this first and then get onto the principle, rather than showing the principle first and getting into this. So if you see, if you have such data, one can imagine this as the real estate experience. Okay, someone in real estate, as the experience grows, they could be as high as this, as they could be as low as this. And if you see, what I'm trying to basically hint here is the variance of your, or the range of your values with experience is growing. Okay, so in such a case, if you see, even if we end up with the best line of best fit, which can optimize to the least. Okay, now this list is not always the ideal list, but it is the least, right? So if you get to a point like this, what would happen is, based on different x values, your errors will increase or decrease. Okay, the errors are just going to explode as the experience is increasing. All right, so in which case it's not an ideal situation to apply a linear regression. Okay, because if you think about it, if I use x as opposed to errors, starts with lesser errors, and then you see this. So as you see x versus errors or residuals, you see a graph like this, which kind of hints you that based on your x value, also your error is changing. Okay, this situation is called heteroscedasticity. Heteroscedasticity. What we expect is homoscedasticity, which is something like this. The errors are pretty randomly distributed, with your x value more or less lying around zero. If you see such example like one shown here, the errors are exploding, and therefore as the x value increases, the errors are going towards infinity. Okay, and which is the second one is quite opposite case. Okay, as the x value increases, they are pretty much around zero. So this is the right data to apply linear regression, and there are techniques in case if you have such data, you can't do anything, and still you have to solve this problem of predicting a continuous variable. There are some techniques, there are some transformations that you can use to get to this data, get this data into this way, but that is more advanced topic. But at this point, this is what you should stick to. Make sure that whatever you're feeding into the model is homoscedasticity, is exhibiting homoscedasticity. Okay, that is the first assumption. Second assumption is errors should be normally distributed. That is, let's assume that this is are here. I know for the fact that like few of us are here who are already intermediate in level in the ML. But for the newbies, this is just a very preconditioned knowledge that I'm just trying to share. Something is normally distributed means 95% of the data lies between two standard deviations. Okay, so to understand what standard deviation is, it's just a variance transformed technique. That means it just talks about the spread of your data, and it quantifies that spread, basically the standard deviation. So within two standard deviation, you have almost like 95% of your data covered. So when I say like errors are normally distributed, and most important assumption, I just want to take a step back and talk a little more on the normal distribution. Most important assumption of normal distribution is the mean is zero. Okay, so the mean of a normal distribution is generally zero. So when you say the errors are normally distributed, that means the errors sum up to zero, and all the errors are within two standard deviations. Which means if you think about it, it's kind of supporting the previous fact that I told. As I increase the X value, the errors goes exploding to infinity, right? But if they are normally distributed, that won't happen. Okay, mostly the errors would be pretty much sorted in two standard deviations. So what does that mean? That means, like, if I take errors and take the mean of errors and then plus or minus two standard deviation of this, I pretty much have like 95% of my data covered up. Okay, so that is what the assumption states, that is errors are normally distributed for two reasons. The summation of errors go normal. The second is pretty much everything is around zero within two standard deviation. Okay, so that is the second assumption. The third assumption is errors are independent in nature. That is, you don't see a pattern like this when you plot x versus error, because that means you would also have to model such a pattern, which would lead to overfitting and whatever reasons, and that is quite an unpredictable thing to do. So if I just plot x versus errors, if I find some pattern like this, that means this is not a good data to apply linear regression. Okay, so those were like assumptions of linear regression. Now we will see that in action here. Oops. So I'm just trying to split the train and test data here. Okay, and then fitting linear regression, getting to know what's my sum of squared errors. Now, sum of squared errors is like 425, believe that I saw here. Let me just plot a linear regression line and show you so that you get a good feel of visual aspects of it. We've already seen the coefficients and stuff, but this is the visual representation of the linear regression. You see the line is here, and this is pretty much the line of best fit, at least from the visual aspect. And then, yeah. Now let me just show you what's the R squared, R squared formula. It's basically everything here, whatever I show, the statistics, whatever the formulas I show, if those are fairly from intuition, coming from intuition of things, right? So R squared is also one such thing. So the formula for R squared is y hat minus y bar whole square by yi minus y bar whole square. That means in your training data, whatever you're giving, every point minus just the average value whole square divided by y hat minus y bar whole square is your R squared value. And it is intuitively, if you look at it, if your y bar train is pretty much, if your actual data and your predicted data are going hand in hand, then both of these will be pretty much same, and which will lead to one, which will be 100% R squared. Okay, so that's the intuition behind this formula, and this is what I've basically evaluated here. Before, when we did this using a library, we saw that 61 something was R squared, and which is what you see now here. Obviously, I'll be sharing this notebook to you, so you'll have this thing with you. Anyway, so now I just wanted to see the errors are normally distributed or not. They are, if you see, it's pretty much normal distribution. Of course, you don't see a very ideal normal distribution, but yes, there is some normality to it. Are the errors homoscedastically distributed? I guess yes, because I don't see a trend like thing happening here. It's pretty much normally distributed with respect to X. When I see errors, they are quite stationary, I would say. And if the errors terms are independent of each other, if you see the previous errors, all I did is just plot it in some kind of a time axis. I saw there is no dependency of the error at t plus 1 divided compared to t minus 1 or whatever. So that's the thing about it. Now, okay, so that's the thing about the linear regression, and one of the demo on that. I'll just quickly try to wrap up something on regularization, because this could give you a better concept. So regularization is basically, if you think about it, like let's say if you have points like this, assume that this is training data. Okay, And then I have some testing data like this. That means uh, this data is basically kept out of linear regression to gradient, I mean, go into gradient descent and stuff. But only training data is shown. Now, if I just apply linear regression, what can happen is this. And when my test data comes into picture, the errors would be this. And if I have more such data, I will end up having too many such errors. Okay. So, is there a better way to plot this? Let me check. Maybe something like this. Something like this, let's say. Something like this, maybe. Relatively better. Some errors you will encounter in training, but now the errors of your test could be reduced, maybe better than before. So this kind of model is what is expected. It's not like the previous model where you just overfit the data and end up learning so much from your training data that you can't learn from the new data coming. So this is the example for overfitting. And gradient descent without any filters to it will do something like this. Okay, and therefore there's a need of regularization. That means we need to accommodate for the testing data, and for that there are two techniques in linear regression. I'll quickly wind it up and will be open for the questions, which is lasso. There are two techniques, lasso and ridge. Because we understand that what is our cost function? Cost function was basically yi minus c1x plus c2 whole square, right? So because we know that we are trying to model perfectly like this, what we are now going to say is, you know what, I'm just going to do just more than that. I will do something like this. Lambda into c1 plus c2 or c1 square plus c2 square. Okay. Now what this means is that now the cost is not just this; it is this total thing. So if I am trying to minimize this, basically I'm not overfitting to this. I am trying to induce some noise, some basically non-zero value, and this lambda is something which you can tune, like 0.01, 0.05, something, whatever. You can apply a grid search for loop and try to tune this. But the overall intuition for this is basically rich, because rich does this kind of mechanism, and this for the same thing lasso would do something like this. I won't write this again, but I'll try to write this one, lambda into c1 plus c2. So basically lasso is just taking the L1 part, this is L2 part. L2 is squared coefficients and L1 is just the coefficients. uh, the intuition here is very simple, that so far we were just taking the training data as our the base thing, and we are trying to perfectly overfit that data. Now I'm just inducing some noise in it, and this lambda also can be considered anything between 0 to 1. So what happens is we are not trying to perfectly fit the existing data. Now how it is going to help, if you think about it, let's say I induce a factor like lambda into c1 square, where c1 square is the coefficient of your independent variable. Now what happens is, if c1 is higher, for the previous example, if you see, this was something which was like this, okay, higher slope, and then we modeled it for something like this. We modeled with something like this. If you see, this has relatively less slope than this, isn't it? Do you guys agree? I don't have enough time to wait for the responses, but I assume it as yes. So if you see, the slope of this line will be relatively less to an overfitted line. So what happens when your cost already existing cost, that is sum of squared errors, is added up to this, we will try to pick C1s which are lesser in magnitude. Okay, and therefore getting to a point something like this, which is less overfit, and therefore we reduce our coefficients pretty much well. So I just have a very quick example running for you on this so that I can show you the effect of regularization. So the data is Big Mart data. It's again a quite popular data in the market. So I'll just try to get on to the regularization aspect, not really talk too much about the regression and stuff. But I'll show you a regression model. What is the sum of squared errors that it is giving? So this is the mean sum of squared errors that you're getting basically by not doing any regularization. It's 133,473,8 something. Okay, you've fitted the model. Basically, here also you have the same statement. Predict the sales based on the store attributes and things like that. It's basically a retail store, and you're trying to predict the sales of it, right? And then this is what the error I got. Now lreg.predict. Now I'll try to do something like I'll try to see what happens with regularization. Okay, so if I look at the coefficients, oops, I think I didn't run this. Let me just run it again. So I wanted to show you the change of regularization aspect actually, in terms of coefficients. So first, my plan is to run a basic linear regression and show you the spread of coefficients, how the coefficients are in terms of magnitude. Okay, so these are the coefficients that you modeled, and you see that there are coefficients which are higher in magnitude. There are some with higher in magnitude positively and negatively good. And magnitude again is not considering the direction. There are few variables which don't have pretty much zero weight. Right now, this is just a simple linear regression. Now, what I do is do a ridge regression, and uh, let me just go back and see. This was my error with the simple linear regression. And when I looked at a ridge regression, and ridge regression just adds up that penalty extra. And I'm just trying to see now what's my error on the test data. It is reduced from 134 something to 134,2558 from 134,959325. Okay, and you see there's a parameter which is alpha, which is analogous to your lambda here that I just wrote. So this lambda is nothing but your alpha. Okay, so this into some coefficient square is what you're adding to your cost function so that it generalizes better. And you see the results are positive. And the same thing I try doing for different alpha values. 0.05. Yeah, this is this is 124 something, but I think this is on the train data. This one is on the train data. This is on the test data. If you see, train data has 124 something and test data has 134 something. Whereas, so that's about the ridge regression. Now, if I look at the lasso, there's one intuition here. Lasso, if you have to accommodate for this, C1 into lambda is what we take instead of just C1 square. So if you want to minimize this scenario, we need to minimize C1 a lot, because when we get to C1 of 2, C1 square gives you 4, and therefore you reduce your slope for lesser C1 values also. But here we can't do that with lasso. So lasso we have to reduce even further. So there's a chance that the coefficients go to 0 for the same reason, and which is what you'll see. So lasso we just ran and we got 133 something. We reduced it further from 134 to 133, and let's see the coefficients. So coefficients, if you see, most of the coefficients have just gone. Only the ones which are really important stay with you, and this is what lasso does to you. So basically it's trying to reduce overfitting, add a term lambda to it, and once you add the lambda to it, basically you're injecting noise to reduce the inclination of your slope, and that's where you're getting to this. So that's so all I wanted to show you out of regularization is how the coefficients vary with regularization, and how you can reduce overfitting using regularization, and which is what we saw. We saw 134 something was the error with simple linear regression, and Lasso and Rich gave fairly less sum of squared error, or mean squared error rather, and that is what regularization can do to you. So with this, I think I conclude my session for starting from basic linear regression to touching upon some business aspects, demonstrating something and giving the math intuition and so on and so forth. So I'm open for any questions.
Thank you so much, Ashish. That was a wonderful session. I wanted to ask everyone to please help us with their feedback so that we can collate all of that and send it to Ashish as well. And if there are any questions related to the session, please go ahead.
Last one and Ridge are only used in linear regression, also used in logic regression, but yes, there are other regular techniques to reduce overfitting in other algorithms. For regression problems, we'll stick to mostly Lasso and Ridge. Sajid Manal had this question. Any other question, guys?
So yes, I wanted to inform that we are arranging a process in where we can share the recording as well as the notebooks that our experts use during the session. So it's going to take like a bit of time from my end. So just a request to all the participants to have a bit of patience. Also, that's why we're basically creating a GitHub repos where we can share all of this. And yes, we would like to know how did you feel about the session. So please feel free to ask questions at the go if there are any. And if there's anything, you can connect with Ashish or me on LinkedIn.
What are the math concepts needs to be aware for linear regression? Pretty much whatever I have told. If you can just go back and see the recording, that should be fine. I'm just basically trying to touch upon maximum, minimum, slope, and calculus side of things. The only thing that I tried doing in this session was to abstract it in a very intuitive way. So you can, for starters, use this recording as a reference and maybe go deep diver into your certain what do you say math statistics books like Gujarati, and so there are some authors that I have, but right now I don't have them handy. So probably you can maybe connect me on LinkedIn. I'll help you with those. Give reference links for statistics concepts. So there is just a minute. I have stored in my favorites. Let me just grab them, or else I'll if I can't grab it right now, I'll send it across through WhatsApp. So I think 90 minutes, I would say personally, is a little less time for linear regression to covering all these things. So given chance, I would have stayed back more and had more of this. But yes, with the interest of time, I abstracted things away. So not everything, but few things away.
Sure, we will definitely have another session with Ashish. I think we are. Yes. So yes, if you want to wait for a couple of 1-2 more questions, if not, then we can wrap it up.
All right. Yeah. Last 2 questions.
I think everybody is busy having lunch. Yeah.
I need to grab one for me as well. Okay. All right, guys. So it was nice meeting you guys on a weekend, and then that's pretty much I had for today. And have a nice weekend. Stay in touch.
Thank you so much, Ashish. I'd like to thank you on behalf of the entire team of Griatim and all the participants present.
Awesome. Congratulations. Thank you so much for watching this video end to end. On this particular channel, you will find everything that it takes to upskill you to become a data scientist. We have the 100% proven recipe. Check out the goodies over here, the workshops, the programs, and there's a number right here. Feel free to call me and I'll be very happy to help you with your journey in upskilling yourself and becoming a data scientist. Hit the subscribe button, click on the bell icon. Just make sure that if you like this particular video, don't forget to like it and follow us socially. I'll be there helping you out with how to make that transition happen for you.
Log on to Grey Atom's learning platform to unlock more content. Subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon for regular updates.